I'm meteorologist Alana Brophy, and we've moved into spring, but that doesn't mean our mountains have stopped accumulating snow. We're still seeing some high elevation snow with our next storm system moving through, but we have to talk about snowpack. I've done so many stories in the years past about the lack of snowpack, so it's nice this year that I don't have to talk about that. And as we look at the numbers, these are numbers from earlier this week, they kind of break down what the state has been experiencing. We're about 100% of average, which we love to see. Normal snowpack. And as you look at numbers throughout the state, you can see the eastern side of the state did very well. The southwest desert picking up a tremendous amount of moisture at 133% of average. You may remember the southwest desert had that extremely long dry streak. So nice to see some moisture has moved in there, 107% of average up there in the north. And as you look at these numbers, they're healthy numbers. And we love to see that. And as we get warmer and warmer and head into spring, we're going to see that runoff coming from the snowpack, but we're still accumulating, and this is very important. As we look at western snowpack, it gives you a really good idea of our storm pattern. We look at Utah, and you can tell how our storms moved in over the winter months, and they were definitely from the Pacific Northwest. They came dropping in, so we see those healthy numbers in places like Washington and Oregon. Also, California, only 83% of average, so the westerly flow wasn't as strong, and we know that we did very well, but notice at those other states where we were dipping into those storms from the north and the northwest flow really ended up helping us out, especially in northern Utah, and did well in the way of snowpack. So very healthy to see those numbers as you look at the Great Basin, 91% of average, which really isn't too bad in the middle of April. Snowpack is so incredibly important. Our snow dictates how our reservoirs will fill up in the state of Utah, and it is a critical issue that we monitor throughout the year. It's something that's so important because we know our water year is long and we live in a high desert community, which means that any bit of moisture is welcome. So these numbers looking really good, and we're happy to see that.
Now, if you've grown up in Utah, you've heard it before. Lots of snow means lots of water for our reservoirs. But do you know exactly how much? Because my friend Jordan Clayton does.
I work for the NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and I work for the Snow Survey Program within the NRCS.
In my opinion, Jordan has one of the most important jobs in Utah. We call it the greatest snow on earth, people, so we might as well monitor how much of it we get. Jordan and the Snow Survey crew do just that.
We are tasked with measuring the mountain snowpack through the western states. And so our agency and our office particularly covers the states of Utah, Nevada, and California around the Lake Tahoe area. And what we do is we maintain a large number of weather stations called SNOTEL, S-N-O-T-E-L. And what that does, it stands for Snowpack Telemetry. And what each one of those weather stations do is that they collect information about the water equivalent in the snowpack, how deep the snow is, also some other things like precipitation, air temperature, soil moisture, and that allows us to forecast how much water we're going to get when all that snow melts.
SNOTEL sites are located throughout Utah and are higher elevations. You need several inches of snow to get an inch of liquid water, and the Snow Survey makes several trips into the mountains during the winter months to monitor that snowpack.
We typically see our snow accumulation season start in November, and it'll last at least until the end of March, and sometimes it extends farther than that. Now, some years are better, of course, but typically that's when we see our snow accumulation season at its best. And then, of course, the water is used throughout the year, particularly in the summer months when we're not getting very much moisture. And there's a lot of withdrawals for things that we need, like water for agriculture and other, uses of the water.
Okay, but we want numbers. How much of the reservoir water is actually snow?
And actually, in the state of Utah, we get largely more than 95% of our water from snowpack. And so, yes, we do get a little bit of moisture from summer rain, particularly in the southwest corner of the state. But by and large, most of the water that we receive, again, more than 95% of it, comes from our annual snowpack. And so it's critically important for us to be able to characterize how much water is available in that snowpack and how much we might get delivered from reservoirs and streams when it all melts.
Hello, 95%. So yes, winter weather is crucial to our communities. And here's a Utah weather myth. If it doesn't dump snow in the valley all winter, it's not a successful season. Well, that's totally wrong. Snow in the mountains is always a win.
It's sometimes hard because people will have this anecdotal, hey, I got a lot of snow at my house, so it seems like we're doing pretty well, but maybe your house is close to the airport, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting snow where it counts, which is in the mountains.
Speaking of mountains, this is usually the time of year I would head to the mountains with the snow survey team. I've typically traveled to Trial Lake to measure snow. It's the headwaters to four major water basins in northern Utah: the Bear River, Weber River, Duchesne River, and the Provo.
Trial Lake is one of our most important sites, as you already mentioned. It's a really exciting place to go because there's a snow course that's been measured there that's a manual snow measurement location, and that's been measured there since the late 1920s. It's a really old location, and there's actually a couple of old historic photos that go farther back than that. What we've done since 1978 is we've continued to measure the manual snow course every year, but in addition to that, now we have an automated snow measurement station called the SnowTel station at that location, again, since 1978.
So this year at Trial Lake, we were lower than 2019, but higher than 2018.
This year, we were about 8 inches lower as of today at the Trial Lake SnowTel site in terms of water equivalent, how much water is in the snowpack. About 8 inches less water in that snowpack as of today, as there was last year at this time. The year before was terrible, as I mentioned. We're about 7 or so inches more water in the snowpack this year than there was that year. And so we're kind of right in the middle of those scenarios, which is, again, reinforces that we're just having an average year this year, which we were due for one of those.
Average. Okay, there's nothing wrong with average, but an average snowpack does not automatically mean an average runoff.
Also need to be careful about being overly optimistic. This year we do have around an average snowpack, but what we're forecasting is for a little bit below average runoff. And the reason why is that last summer we had particularly dry conditions. I know it was record days without precipitation in the southwest corner of the state, but really throughout the state of Utah we were very dry. And that depleted a lot of our soil moisture. So whereas our snowpack is doing, again, quite well, we're a little bit above average, that's a good thing, our soil moisture is below average. And what that means is that when all that snow melts, we're going to have a little bit of a lower runoff efficiency in terms of how much water actually makes it to the streams than we would have in some other years.
Soil moisture is also one of the elements that goes into our drought monitor.
Snowpack and spring runoff often are factored into our drought monitor. Really important and something we know in Utah that we use frequently. As we look at that drought monitor, we can see that there are portions of Utah that still fall into that drought category. The good news with the latest drought monitor, the north is out of it. We love to be able to say that and see that with healthy numbers and a decent amount of precipitation. The yellow that you see is dry, and you notice it in portions of Utah County, central Utah, and down near Iron County. Now, a bulk of south central Utah falls into that moderate range, and when it comes to severe, only right there in and around Lake Powell in the Four Corners area are we dealing with that severe rating when it comes to drought, which is good news. Now, a series of storms can always help and wipe out portions of the state, which is what happened in the Southwest Desert near Washington County, looking really good on the drought monitor for the Southwest Desert as of right now.
You'll see the drought monitor on ABC4 News during the forecast frequently. The updated conditions come out on Thursdays. So to recap, we may vary by region, but overall an average snowpack this year.
We look at our precipitation over the last year and we compare it to average. And as you take a look at this map, you're able to see a lot of yellow and orange indicating that we're about 100% of normal. So that's really good to see that our precipitation in the last year has been very close to average throughout the state.
And while we warm in the valleys with spring on our minds, storms and the weather pattern can still help us out when it comes to the greatest snow on Earth.
I'd love to see additional snow for the next 2 weeks or so, and then tapering off. And so we can get a nice, efficient runoff starting in sort of late April into May into June. But I don't want to see it wait until June and then melt all at once, because that's where you can get some flooding and people run into problems.
So over the next couple of weeks, temperatures will continue to warm up, and we know that higher elevation snow will continue to melt off. What does that mean for spring runoff? Well, there's a possibility we could see those rivers running high. It's something to keep in mind if you're going to be out and about, and something to be aware of is those temperatures of the water are extremely cold. It only takes a few minutes for hypothermia to set in, possible localized flooding near rivers and streams. We've seen this a lot in the years past, and we know that it is possible as we get through the next couple of months. Places like the Provo River have a tendency to run high, potentially dangerous for small children and pets. ABC4 has covered numerous tragedies when it comes to high running cold fast water. We want to avoid that as we get through the next several weeks, so be careful if you're going to be outdoors, and keep it in mind that that spring runoff is not something to be tampered with. Be careful out there. Our snowpack benefits are reservoirs. We love to see the runoff, but we also want everyone to stay safe.